I am finding a correlation between the trouble people have decluttering physical items and art journaling. Um, People have trouble decluttering because it's a very emotional process. Let me tell you where I'm coming up with this theory. Through my own life experiences, I live a pretty clutter-free life, but it wasn't always that way if you go way, way back, I guess. Um, but I saw the trouble people were having, and I started a group on Facebook a couple years ago called Declutter Buzz. And I've been helping people try to sift through their physical items. And it's been very, very interesting what I've learned. I've written a couple hundred articles on this. I've learned a lot. And so lately I've been playing around with art journaling, like neurographic line drawing. And of course, I've always been um, a person that does, Julia Cameron talks about morning pages in the artist way. And that's a process I started doing, 30 years ago. And I do it very regularly, not every single day like I used to, but very regularly because it clears away the mental clutter in my head almost always immediately. Um, Now, does it last? Well, that's up to me. And of course, the stronger my habit became, yes, it works. It works very well for me, or I wouldn't keep doing it after 30 years. So I've been playing with this combination of using words to journal and using lines like neurographic art line drawing. And boy, have I hit on something that I really love. Um, I think the reason, or I know the reason people have trouble getting rid of stuff, they hold on so tight. As a culture, a lot of us have trouble letting go of every, people, places, things. Um, like decluttering brings up every emotion that we know. Um, some people, many people hate change. I mean, try and get a particularly older person to try something new, make change. And they don't want to. Some don't want to. When you ask them why, they'll tell you it's because, well, I've never done it that way. Well, in my view, is that's a really good reason to try something new if you've never done it that way. Um, Many people really don't even know their likes and dislikes, especially people living in big families. I once read a novel by Elizabeth Berg. She's from Newton, Mass, and she wrote these, I don't know, novels about life, her life. I don't know. I'm not a big novel reader, but there was something in her writing that I was drawn to. And the last book of hers that I read was a long time ago. And I remember the first words in the book was something to the effect of she got a divorce, her divorce finally went through, and she found herself in a grocery store for the very first time since her kids left the nest and her husband left. And she stood there looking around because she had no idea what to buy. She had no idea what she liked because she had spent her whole lifetime grocery shopping for her children and her husband, for her family. And I think a lot of us go through life like that, especially those that, live with others. All these things come under the umbrella of mental clutter. All that muck in your head and the trouble you have making decisions. Well, like if I go to buy a sofa, I don't have any trouble because I know I only like this one style. Um, and that's what I go right for. Um, have you ever, without any forethought or pre-planning, just opened a cupboard door, a drawer, or a closet and started pulling things out and throwing them away or reorganizing? I've done that several times. And in the beginning, I found it really odd. After a few times, I made the connection that almost immediately after, once like the very next day, another door opened for me. A new thing came across the desk for me. And somehow my mental self knew to make room for this new thing. The reason I like art journaling as a way to get through the decluttering process is it's a safe space where you can just sit down with a pen and a piece of paper or a marker, and you can put words on the paper, whatever is on your mind. You don't worry about grammar and spelling and neatness. We're just getting stuff out of our heads and onto the page, onto the blank canvas, so to speak. It's not a place for sketches and beautiful paintings. It's a place to get what's in your head and keeping you stuck down on the paper. And I've been doing this in the morning. A few of us are doing 30 art journaling drawings in 30 days. And it's really amazing how it sets me up for a good day. Of course, it's up to me to remember what I journaled about that morning. Um, it's a great tool to learn about yourself. Um, many psychologists actually use art journaling as a form of art therapy because it's a neat space for nurturing creativity, healing, self-discovery. It's I've been a working artist for 30 years, and I can't tell you the amount of people say they want to take my workshops, but they have no talent. And I try my hardest to convince them that until I started practicing, I couldn't do what I do either. And it has nothing to do with talent. It has to do with wanting to do it and practicing. And it's from knowing that I know every single one of us has a creative thought, impulse to make creative stuff, whether it's photography, cooking, anything that you love to do, that you put your own twist on is creative. I think we get so hung up on the other stuff that we avoid doing things because they won't come out perfect in our minds, which is silly because, first of all, there is no perfect. And secondly, if I say something's perfect, it's perfect. I'm the only one that has to be a juror for that, right? So I'm taking this time to really explore the combination of the written word and drawing over that, beginning with just simple lines, flowing, curving lines. The whole idea, by the way, of the neurographic art, is we're wired as people to look for patterns. And when our head's all filled with muck and thinking about yesterday, what you should have done, what you could have done better, planning about tomorrow, what could happen, what should happen, what might happen, you're not living in this day when you're doing all that stuff's going on in your head. And so getting that stuff out of your head and onto the page is a really neat explorative way to boost your self-esteem, gain some confidence. I mean, you'll actually find that even decision making becomes faster, easier, especially if you can hone in on what you really like and don't like. It's so easy. If you ask people a question, well, what do you want? The first thing they'll tell you, in my experience, is all the stuff they don't want. If you keep pushing them, people, they will really not be certain about what they do want. We're very certain of the things we don't want. So we think, because a lot of that's driven by the fact we don't like change or we're too afraid to try something. But knowing what we do want, it takes some thought. And art journaling is so awesome for this. There's a lot going on in the world these days. The country I'm in, the USA, is seeming to have an identity crisis right now with two sides pitted against each other, the polar opposite of a breeding ground for peace. And it's affecting me in a way that surprises me because, like I say, I've been practicing these mindful journaling and other practices for 30, 40 years now. And I've never run into so much stuff in my head. Well, that's not true. I mean, back early on when I started learning these techniques, my head was this jammed up. And then I had, of course, years and years of peace, relative peace. There's always going to be some friction. It's life. But lately, my head feels like it did 40 years ago. And I don't like that because I've had a taste, a long, good taste of what it's like to not let the exterior stuff rule my day. So I'm finding a lot of good stuff to work with, and I know it's going to help people declutter their physical things. But again, the first thing, anytime you set out to decluttering your physical stuff, you have to start mentally, or it's just not going to work. Once you lay out a plan of how you're going to declutter, then it's just, chop wood, carry water, get the job done. This goes in the trash. We're going to donate this. We're going to sell that. Boom, done. Um, but unless you know your likes and dislikes and that it's okay to get rid of Aunt Lucy's 100-year-old sofa at the back of the garage with no legs and torn upholstery, that Aunt Lucy doesn't care. She doesn't care. She doesn't want all this stuff she gave you to burden her, to burden you. So once you get a handle on all that mental stuff, the act of physical decluttering will be a piece of cake. Maybe not a piece of cake, but won't be a huge poison pill. Okay.